Welcome back to the home front. I'm your host, Reed Galen. Today, I'm coming to you solo to go through something that one of my dear friends and colleagues put together over the years. His name is Trygve Olson. You all have heard him here on the home front many times, and when I was back at the Lincoln Project podcast there too. And Trygve is a true freedom fighter. He's worked all over the world and here in the U.S. defending democracy and taking on autocrats. And so I thought over the next couple of weeks I would share some of his wisdom with you all. Hopefully I can get him on, convince him to come back at the end of this, and he can give us his take on where we stand today in this fight. But I wanted to go through these rules, and we'll start, guys, at the top. And the number one rule is play the game you're in, not the one you know or wish you were in. And as Trygve wrote, quote, "When one side is playing the zero-sum illiberal game, there is no win-win to be played. You will either win and democracy survives, or you lose to autocratic forces." So that's pretty grim, guys, but I think it's an important thing to understand. I think that most of the people you are hoping will stand up and fight, and I'm talking specifically about Democrats in Washington, D.C., are starting to wake up. I think the alarm clock has gone off. To say that they overslept is an understatement, but there's only so much we can do there and only so much approbation we should heap on them. All we can do is hope that they'll do better, and that in the coming days, weeks, months, and years, a leader on their part will emerge. But I think it's important to understand. I mentioned this guy's name a couple of weeks ago, I think, everybody. His name is James Stockdale. He was an admiral in the United States Navy. He was shot down over Vietnam, spent 7 years in a North Vietnamese prison camp. And he said there were two things that kept him going. One was completely understanding and acknowledging the nature of your situation. Not denying it, not pretending it wasn't as bad as it was, but understanding the nature of where you were and what was happening to you. The second piece of that, though, was an unwavering belief that you would ultimately prevail was incredibly necessary to get through those days. And I can only imagine 7 years in prison. He was ultimately a Medal of Honor recipient. You might have also remembered him as Ross Perot's vice presidential nominee in the 1992 presidential race. But he is a true American hero, and those two things I think have stuck with me a lot. You've heard me talk about them a lot because I think they're so key. And so this first piece is, guys, let's just go through some of this stuff. The fact that federal judges, have handed down orders telling the Trump administration to stop doing something or restart something, as in spending money that has been appropriated by Congress in a previous session, and the Trump administration or Elon Musk and his, golden doodles not paying attention should not be of any surprise to anybody. The only enforcement mechanism that the courts have is the U.S. Marshal Service, who belongs to what? The Department of Justice. My guess is the marshals aren't marching over to the White House or to wherever Elon is living and saying, you have to stop doing this. That's not going to happen. As Lucian Truscott IV, who I assume is a relative of the World War II general of the same name, noted that after the U.S. Marshal Service, a judge could ask the military to step in. Again, in the circumstances we now face, unlikely that the military is going to force Donald Trump to do anything. After all, he is the commander-in-chief, and they're probably not going to tell Elon Musk to do anything either. So when you see a headline like Judge Halts Trump Action, just know that that's an order they have issued, and the Trump people are unlikely to listen to. Now, a lot of people will say this is a constitutional crisis. I suppose it is. But what does that even mean anymore? What does a constitutional crisis represent? Does a constitutional crisis represent thousands or tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of people, millions of people in the streets standing up for our collective rights? I would like to say yes, but I don't think we should count on that. And it's not that the American people are bad. It's just I don't think that we've reached a critical mass in 3 weeks of enough Americans feeling that this is overwhelming them or even paying attention. You and I, who are watching and listening to this, are probably paying attention, and there are lots of things we can and should do to protect ourselves from the fire hose of crap coming out of the White House every day. But we shouldn't have any expectation that there's going to be some hero in the Republican Senate or the Republican House or within the Trump White House or within the Pentagon or within the Treasury Department that's going to save the day. This is what authoritarians do. They move very fast, they break things in a hurry, and they leave a gigantic mess for you and me and all of the people in this country to clean up when they ultimately implode or explode, creating an enormous blast wave of destruction typically in their wake. The second piece is, along those same lines is, don't be, fooled by the idea that Elon Musk has bad polling numbers. Like, do you think he cares about whether or not he has poll numbers? Do you think he cares what people think of him? I don't think so. Why waste time and energy on this? I can only assume that it's clickbait and it gives people something to talk about. But he's not an office holder. He has been elected to nothing, as we all know. And he's not going to care about whether or not he's at 35% approval with the American people. I would even make an argument that by polling his approval level, you're giving him some sort of legitimacy as if there is something to approve of which there is nothing. Sticking with poll numbers for a second, Trump's poll numbers are as high as they've ever been when he's president. What does that tell us? That the people that we're hoping desperately will be upset by his actions are not only not upset, in many cases, they approve of them. Is that frustrating? It can be. If you're going to, however, make fun of people for the price of eggs or whatever other thing you might tease them about for being a Donald Trump supporter or having voted for Donald Trump, I can just tell you that when the time comes and we need them, they're probably less likely to come back to any sort of rational way of thinking if they think that the other option doesn't like them. And I think we saw a lot of that, not only in 2024, but in years prior, where there's a lot of people who don't believe the Democratic Party has anything to offer them or likes them, and they either sat home or they pulled the lever for a guy they know is not good news for them or anybody else. And so I think it's important to understand now where we are. I think that we should expect that Democratic governors who do hold sway, states are sovereign entities, remember everybody, under the Constitution. The governors have an enormous amount of power within their states, as do statewide office holders. And I think they should all get together. I was on the phone with a reporter earlier today who said that J.B. Pritzker of Illinois, had tried to get them all together and a bunch of them wouldn't come. Like, what are you doing? What do you have to do that's more important than protecting your citizens from cuts in Medicaid or school lunches or anything else? Why are you not getting together to come to some sort of mutual aid agreement, or at least show some collective force and a solid front? Right? Being afraid, that's not okay. If you're an elected leader and you're afraid, resign. If you don't want to do the job, don't do the job, but you can't hide anymore. The other part, too, for some of my Democratic office holder friends, I heard about a senator saying, well, I need to be able to work with Secretary X of Department Y. Let me be very clear. Those people are never going to help you. If you are up for re-election in 2026, they will go out of their way to harm you and then blame you for whatever harm befalls your constituents. The idea that any of these people within the Trump administration are going out of their way to help anybody with a D behind their name, or frankly, anybody with an R behind their name who gets out of line, is lunacy. And we should know that by now. We should know that by now. I think it's high time that everybody in Washington understands that unless you're just there as a apparatchik, part of what I call the political bureaucracy, right? You don't really care. Maybe you've worked for, bad companies and bad actors here at home, and you've worked for bad actors and bad hombres across the world, right? And so you don't really feel any worse, either working for a Donald Trump type or working in a world in which he runs the roost. That's fine. But you have come a long, long way from probably the reason you went to Washington, D.C. in the first place. And so I would ask you to check your premises. If you're not there trying to figure out how to slow the steamroller that is the Trump administration, if you're not figuring out how to throw speed bumps up in front of the regime, if you're just there saying, well, I have a payroll to take care of, or I have a business to run, and you know better, you're part of the problem. You're not part of the solution. You're part of the problem. And so now for those of us at home those of you watching, those of you reaching out to me and to people at the union and to my friends and so many colleagues, what do we do? What do we do? The first thing is self-protection. And I don't mean firearms. I mean taking the time to disengage from politics, to stop doom scrolling all day, every day. I hope you're watching this 10 or 15 minutes or listening to this 10 or 15 minutes and taking a deep breath, walking the dog, doing the dishes, going for a drive, whatever it is you're doing, right? But you don't have to stand in front of the fire hose all day, every day. That is not your job. That is not your responsibility. And it will exhaust you. And that is part of the deal. That is part of what it is regimes like this try to do, which is exhaust people such that it's not that they're protecting themselves, but that they tune out altogether and they say, I want nothing more to do with this. Guys, we already have too many people. I met too many of them on the road this past fall who had decided that neither Republicans nor Democrats have anything to offer them, that no candidate who could talk to them in this time is going to change their outlook, is going to change their lives for the better, is going to make their kids have a better chance at an upwardly mobile life. And until and unless we can prove to them that we are voices and we are leaders who will start to work for them as opposed to, the orange goon or the oligarchs or, putting hate and, revanchism at the front of our arguments, right? If you're just going to come to them with anti, right? And I know it's not fair, but if we're just going to go to them with anti, they're going to stay tuned out. And so for you, take some time with your family, with your friends, pick up a hobby, read more. I know I'm trying to do all of those things. I know that my text-based social media usage, with the exception of posting things like this episode, has gone to near zero. Twitter is unusable. Blue Sky is a lot of the people I've known for many, many years talking to one another. Trickle-down politics is no more a thing than trickle-down economics. If we're not talking to people literally and figuratively where they live, then we're not being honest about the people we need to communicate. And we are not following Trygve's first rule, which is understanding the game we're in, not the game we wish we were in. Things have changed dramatically in the last decade, everybody. We know that. It is time to get out of our unimaginative boxes. It is time for us to say, this is what we're dealing with. Acknowledge. I'm not asking you to accept. I'm asking you to acknowledge. Say, here's where we are. What can I do in this time that, one, makes sure that I have enough rest to get up and work another day? And secondly, what is that work going to be? Right? I see lots of words, as you've heard me say, like fight and resist. I don't know what those words mean right now. It's not screaming bloody murder into a social media app. It's not. And I'm guilty of that too. I also find it to be a release valve sometimes. But we shouldn't be under any illusion that that is anything more than vanity likes. That it is not informing people, it's not enlightening people, it's not giving people a place to go, a place to feel good, or a place to find a way to get involved and make a difference. All right, everybody, I want to thank you so much for taking a few minutes with me today. Thanks, as always, for tuning in to the Home Front. As always, you can find me on Twitter, TikTok, and says.us at Reed Galen. Over at Substack, also the Home Front, on Twitter and Threads at Reed_Galen USA. And as always, guys, please, we have a lot of work to do. Go to jointheunion.us. Get involved today. We're getting something like 150 signups a week. Guys, I need that to be 1,000 signups a week. We need everybody who can get involved to get involved. Doesn't matter where you live. Doesn't matter how much time you have. Get in there. Sign up. I promise we've got a lot coming in the coming weeks, and we need your help. Until then, thanks, everybody, and I'll see you next time.